All right, and we are live. Hey, everybody. This is Maki of the Maki and Jay's podcast.
And this is Jay.
And we are back for our second installment. We still have a bunch of questions, some from the leftover from the first one, and we got a few more submissions as well. Topics include how physical surroundings affect your life. You can only save yourself. Can we save other people from their mental prisons? If you could go back in time and suggest to your child self what they would want to be when they grow up. And then some topics like stuck ship memes, what is gravity, houseplants, shows on Netflix, and a few weird anatomical questions. Yeah, let's dive in. I think to start, we had one topic, which is where to find the podcast that somebody submitted. It's on YouTube. Hopefully you're listening to it when you found it, but it's on YouTube on my.
If they didn't know how to find the podcast, I'm wondering how this answer helps them, but here we go.
Yeah, well, it's on YouTube, and also I'm going to, just for people who want just an audio version, I will put the audio version on Google Drive and put a link on the Facebook post where we share this. Cool. So I think that one is handled.
And on first serious topic,
stuck ship memes.
Yeah.
Very serious topic.
Well, let's suppose that it is, I don't know, years into the future and aliens have recovered this audio off of some flash drive somewhere, and they might be wondering what we're talking about. And as any present listener already knows, some giant cargo ship got stuck in the Suez Canal and cut off that artery of international trade for, I don't know, how many days was it?
Like a week or so. I don't remember.
Like a week. And the internet came through.
The internet delivered. The internet got more mileage out of that ship than the shipping industry did. And then towards the end of it, I was really, I was kind of thinking about this, reflecting on the kind of relationship between my own personal feelings and personal economy and the global economy. And there was a part of me that was valuing the memes from the stuck ship higher than the billions of dollars of trade going through the Suez Canal. I don't know. There was something symbolic there that I could dwell on what it reflects, but it's probably unflattering.
I noticed how a lot of people jumped into it as an opportunity to air their otherwise grievances with the global economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was definitely disappointed when it started moving again. Like, damn it. The memes are we have to find new memes.
Oh, life will find a, we'll make it. They'll just be the next thing. I mean, I think how like something big like this comes up and is kind of everything everyone wants to talk about for a short period of time, and then I don't know, it's, you know, the internet is just this history of old things that we were talking incessantly about for a week at a time.
Yeah, maybe it was a conspiracy where they were just seeing how long this stuck ship would keep us entertained, and once the memes started to drop off, like voila, the global banking whatever unstuck the ship.
That means there has to be some kind of a taste maker there. Someone's like, these memes are good enough. Let's keep the world fucked up in this way.
we need more systemic failures. We need better memes. The memes must flow. It's like Dune, like some idiotic internet version of Dune. Anyways, I feel like we've dropped quite a lot of wisdom there. Should we keep going?
Sure.
You can only save yourself. Can we ever save other people from their mental prisons? This is actually a really interesting question.
What comes up in you when you hear that?
I'm just kind of mentally shifting a little bit from the stuck ships memes, just because this actually, I think, is a very very worthwhile question to examine. It's complex. I think that we ultimately the responsibility of somebody transcending, escaping, finding their way out of their own mental prisons, ultimately that responsibility lies with them, and it's like they're the only person who can do so and who can make the decision or hold the intention to do so. And we can support that. We can support that, and we can also destroy ourselves trying to force it or trying to support it when if they're not ready to. I think one of the things that I've found over and over again, and this is with me kind of trying to transcend and trying to find the other side of my own projections, my own misgivings, grievances, the patterns, and so on. And with me kind of being on the other side and also just seeing what doesn't work on both sides, is that a lot of the times it's not a question of like giving somebody like the words or like just like telling somebody, oh, this is how it is. I find that like I actually learn, and folks and people who have found my presence useful learn more just from presence and from like being around somebody who is an example of like having been where you're at and having found the other side of it. And just like maybe asking questions and maybe like getting clarity from that person, but then again that's also kind of like initiative from the person who's trying to find their way out of some mental prison. And on the other side of it, being I had somebody describe me once as walking permission, which I took as a very high compliment, in the sense that they meant it, that can mean a lot of things, I think, but they meant it in the sense of like permission to be whatever flavor of like weird and bizarre and whatever they happen to be embodying in the moment. And I try to be that. But it was, in that case, it was more of there was some part of them that oftentimes was walking around kind of with this filter on, with this like, in a sense, a sort of self-imposed, sort of collectively imposed, but in a sort of just like feedback loop sort of way, mental prison. And my presence in like embodiment of, in some ways, being outside of and free from that mental prison was in the short term kind of a freedom from that prison, because part of it was their relationships to the people around them and that feedback loop. And I think in the long term, if a way to take initiative of that is you can also say like, okay, what am I sensing is different about this person's presence? And like, I'll do this when I'm around somebody who I'm like, they are free in a way that I don't feel as free. What are they doing differently? How do they see, perceive, be differently than I am? and what can I absorb from that, and what can I like play with just the next time like I'm just out on my own, and like what little bits of energy can I kind of like insert into how I'm doing things, carrying myself. And I think you can kind of, without even really trying very hard, uh, help free, whatever word you want to use, be a helpful presence for a lot of people in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I'm gonna be saying a lot of the same things in different words, but maybe not everything. I think there's a bunch of things that you said I hadn't thought of, but a lot of the ways that I would say things have something like a gardening metaphor, that I can't make a plant grow, but I can certainly like try and influence the conditions under which the plant might choose to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, preparing the soil and maybe even trying to plant the seeds. But at the end of the day, I'm just a participant in the process. And as you said it's ultimately another person's responsibility. And I think it's that is the only thing that can be true, because like they're the only one with the capacity. It's like, how could anyone else be responsible?
Mm-hmm. And like I'm responsible for the way that I show up, or the presence that I have in a space. But like I literally cannot be responsible for anybody else's growth.
Right.
Like if you break down responsibility to like response space ability, like ability to respond, like I don't have that for their stimuli. They do.
Yeah. Now sometimes like good gardening really helps things along.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we who are not the person in question have zero effect.
Yeah.
And that now there's all this devil in the details on how conditions dependent it is, what is helpful and not. Almost always it's the case that if there's some feeling of forcing it, it's not right. And especially when there's forcing it, there's a certain amount of, you mentioned the word permission, and it kind of goes the other way too, of only going where someone has given you permission to go with them. Because if you're going where they don't have permission, whatever you're doing is just going to bounce off. So there's that pacing where you're like walking in a little more permission, walking a little further, a little more permission.
Yeah. And there's also a case of that, I think, where like even that, in this, especially when there's dynamics such as like abuse or control or oppression or things like that, and whether that be systemic, societal, or whether that be like you just grew up in a specific kind of environment, and you've kind of like internalized those patterns.
It's just normal.
Yeah, but I think to some degree everybody has some amount or some different flavors of that. It's something that I think our species works and wants to transcend, and it just has many different forms. But I think with that, there's also like sometimes just the way that like you choose to express your freedom or express yourself, or kind of reclaims a bit of sovereignty or freedom that you have, will piss people off, and they will take it as a slight on on their sovereignty and so on, and it's messy territory. Yeah. And I think a mark of maturity is being able to recognize when somebody is doing that, and especially even if you have an initial response or reaction to it, to be able to kind of check yourself and say, okay, am I pissed off because this person is doing something to me, or because they're simply kind of breaking my expectations of them, but really they're not really intruding on my sovereignty in any way, and I'm just kind of having a reaction to this.
Right. I might be thinking that they are terrible for doing a thing. And at the other end of this is, sometimes situations really do benefit from something more radical, from trying to like just fully exemplify or directly state something that you're representing,
Hmm.
and see if the person, even if they were resistant to it before, if just being completely clear and honest about something changes how they receive it.
Yeah. And a lot of the times I think when you discover that, oh, like my freedom and this person's, just when you and somebody else, just both of you expressing your freedom tends to create clashes, that's when you create boundaries there. And it's not like when you put a boundary there, it's not like you're a bad person or I'm a bad person or whatever. It's the way that we are doing things. If we keep doing them this way, it's going to be destructive to both of
Mm-hmm,
us.
mm-hmm.
um, and so we're going to have this boundary, because kind of like this imaginary demarcation here, where we we avoid feeding into each other's cycles in ways that don't help either of us.
I'm wondering if you know of, and I don't really know of, but ways that people can practice this dance of boundaries, because I don't feel like it's something that we are probably not in any culture, let alone this one. I just
Yeah,
don't think it's common that we just don't learn to just kind of naturally do it and accept the process.
yeah. One of the things, there's a really, I think there's one of the major things that I've kind of internalized about it in the last few years is that, and this is a little bit of a mind fuck, because it goes against, I think, just the concept of how we think about boundaries, is that I find it's like I have to internalize a boundary, in the sense of like I have to internalize, like, okay, I have the right to feel safe in this sense, or I have the right to, like, uh, whatever it may be. And I have to internalize and kind of get to the point, just, and this will, I'll just like go on a walk and like talk to myself through it until I get to a point where I actually personally feel really solid in it. Like I have to internalize something before me asserting it verbally will be effective.
Hmm.
Um, like in this, and it's in this very very uh almost like somatic sense of like, if I try to assert something before I believe that before like I really believe it, um I find it's a lot of the times like it's unconvincing on the other side. And
Mm-hmm.
when somebody does that to me, it's like, if it's somebody who I know and who I like and who I respect and who I want to see in, in a, like, in a better state, a lot of the times like I'll try to like go back with like just be very affirming about it, and kind of try to help provide whatever support I can for them kind of internalizing that boundary, and especially like that part of themselves that is protected by that boundary. um
Hmm.
but for myself, I find that like if the most effective way to actually have a boundary and have other people respect it is like doing kind of my own personal work on it and around that space first, and just sort of like talking through it myself, maybe talking through it with somebody and getting to the point where I believe in it. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I'm saying it's kind of second nature. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
asserting the boundary to somebody, when it, especially when it's difficult or it's scary, can be a very cathartic uh, process in that
Hmm.
internalization.
Hmm. I think I think boundaries for me often aren't things that need more of like a top down process. They're more things that arise from the bottom and come up. And
Mhm.
once I notice that, like, oh, there's a thing there, it just becomes like clear to me in a flash.
Yeah.
And so I think I've actually come across as somewhat jarring to some people before, when all of a sudden I'm very clearly asserting something that it seemed to just be kind of without warning.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I think there's one more thing there's something about what you said with the bottom up versus top. Oh yeah. One other thing is that that helps for me is that whenever I'm setting boundaries, I find that if I'm setting them in response to something that somebody else is doing and kind of trying to set one around, like in their frame of reference, it's really ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the other side of that is that if I say, okay, this person is doing something that is like pissing me off or kind of aggravating me or causing harm to me, I ask like, okay, what part of it, like in my frame of reference, what sanity am I trying to protect, or what part of myself am I trying to keep safe, and what is like in my frame of reference, kind of like where's the kind of the line where I'm gonna respond if somebody crosses it. And then when I do that, I'm not doing so, one, in response to the other person, and two, primarily out of anger. I'm doing it primarily out of like just like tending and care to like my own being and um my own safety, my own whatever. And I find that that tends to when you respond in the kind of in the other person's frame of reference, it tends to have a escalate pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I find that when I assert it in my own frame of reference, and I'm kind of embodying it in my own frame of reference, like, hey, this is where this is kind
Could
of
you
where.
could you maybe be a little more um like maybe not particular to an actual event, but maybe particular to an imaginary event of what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. Let me think about that a minute. Because I think it would be good to come up with an example here. Hmm. Okay, so this is sort of a business one. Um, but I'm not sure it's the best example of boundaries, but I think I can kind of use it to illustrate the frame of reference thing. This is like, let's say I have a client, and the client is, and I'm doing some work for them, and the client is like late on paying me, and I keep doing the work because it has to get done. And I keep having, like, I keep personally being really aggravated because it takes them longer than I expect to actually get paid. The external frame of reference is this person is going to pay me on time. The internal frame of reference is I am only going to work when I am being supported in that work and when other people are meeting their agreements. In the sense of, I can't control whether or not my client can pay me on time, but I can be very clear and say, hey, if you're late, I'm not doing anything until you catch up. And preferably doing so is like getting that in writing as well. And then to them, it's not like this battle on, like, texting them or whatever and trying to get things rolling. It's this, like, I've laid out kind of what happens in my sphere of influence very clearly. And if, like, if this condition changes, then this is like, I'm not going to do this unless I'm actually supported in it. And that's kind of the I don't know if that's the best
Hmm.
example, but
I
yeah.
this is probably not catching all of what you're saying, but
Mm-hmm.
an aspect of it that seems important to me is that you you find some message to deliver to them that's not about them.
Yeah, I'm basically laying out my behavior and my, like,
And what
it's
expectations they would have on your behavior.
right, exactly. And it's not pay me, bitch. Like, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to control their behavior. that's an act, like trying to control anybody else's behavior is an exercise in futility and insanity, etc. Like I
See,
just
also, can you save anyone else?
yeah, exactly. It goes both ways. It goes like whether you're trying to help them or trying to get them to do something that makes your life better. If you're trying to control anybody else's behavior, like you cannot, period. Like it's just you're it's a very, very draining battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I I'm really curious about learning more personally in this department. I think this is an area where um, I I have a lot of room for growth.
Hmm.
As I'm one of those people who, um, due to whatever my original circumstances were, I didn't learn that, or I was told that it was not okay for me to have my own wants and needs, and um, various levels of socialization on top of that. As a grown up, I had to discover that it was important to know my boundaries and to hold them for myself, and to put those up between me and other people when I need to. And having spent several years as a grown up doing that, I find that that has some good consequences in that it keeps some of the riffraff behavior out of my home turf. What shit I'll put up with from people. But I really started to feel like there's a second half of it that's missing, which is something more of making peace. Um, or or maybe, okay, granted, you have a boundary, and granted you're going to find a way to hold that boundary. Are there better ways to just do it than to stick your hand out and hold someone at arm's length? Especially because, how you're pointing out, if it, the way you respond to them, people really often react poorly to hearing your boundaries. Like quite often, it's just kind of a rare person who hears what you're saying and doesn't take it personally somehow. And when I say take it personally, I mean a couple of different things by that. Some of them will turn it against you and get angry at you, and other people I've noticed turn against themselves and feel really ashamed. Whereas I
Mm.
was, in many of these cases, either way, I was just hoping to communicate about the conditions that would allow me to thrive in the context with them, so that hopefully we can both thrive. And I wasn't meaning to bring any shame or anger or anything in any direction.
Yeah.
And so I keep on realizing that there have to be better outcomes out there, and this is a topic that I'd really like to study more.
Yeah.
And also, say after you put up a boundary with someone, like, does it have to be that way forever? Suppose there was a rupture, what about the repair? What about, how does reconciliation work?
Hmm.
Um,
Sometimes I've found that in some relationships, like I will just me asserting a boundary somewhere, or asserting like, hey, I really don't like when you do this, and
mhm.
here's why. um a lot of the times just having that conversation and both of you kind of being on the same page about it, it makes it really unnecessary to kind of like keep uh like it kind of makes whatever discomfort or sense of unsafety or whatever that I had with that, it kind of makes that dissolve in this sort of magical way. Not always, but sometimes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Do we want to hop around
Yeah,
questions?
sure.
Yeah.
Um, well, we have some more of this second list down here. Would you like to tackle gravity for me?
Why is gravity? What are birds? We just don't know. Um, that's a reference to a old British science comedy, the name of which is escaping me right now.
Hmm.
Um, why is gravity?
You can ask the physicists, and and I mean, it's not like they'll tell you they'll know. They can tell you they model it really well.
Yeah.
There's something extra weird about it, which is that it's action at a distance.
Hmm.
One of the basic impulses in the scientific method is to try and isolate a system, and to be able to claim that if you can keep the things we're considering are inside of this box and the things we're not considering are outside of this box, then you can hope to make some coherent explanation. But if you have to consider the entire entanglement of the universe, then there's no hope.
You're
And so
fucked.
and so when people are like forced to be reminded of the fact that the universe isn't entirely local, some people can just get really unnerved by that.
Yeah. One thing that I also really like is that, like, we have, how do I best explain this? We have like scientific models, numerical models, mathematical models, and then there's also kind of a category of like, once things get like complex enough that our tools aren't good enough to describe them in that form yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like once things are kind of at that point, when we use things like stories or narratives or archetypes or fables, we're kind of using this like metaphor language to say, okay, we don't have like a kind of clear deterministic model for this, but this is this other mental model that has like, let's say we're just trying to describe somebody using a character in a movie or something. Like, here is this other like kind of model that we have that has very rough edges and very complex behavior, but seems to have some similarity with this other thing, um, which is completely veering from the question. Uh, but it's kind of like we have the things that we can describe with kind of precise scientific models, and for the things that are beyond that level of complexity, or when we're trying to describe something that is so rich in detail and nuance in life that reducing it kills what we're trying to describe, then we switch to using models of metaphor and of models of kind of just this sort of felt similarity.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's just like directly reaching outside of what our box was to what's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we haven't answered the question, which I'm okay with.
Haven't answered the question of why gravity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. The universe wants to hug itself.
Cool. Well, there is another question back up at the top. How physical surroundings can affect your life?
I love this question.
What do you love about it?
I think largely just personally, I've had a lot of variance and variation in that, especially the last few years. I used to have this very, I'll say like individualistic kind of, you can do anything, damn your surroundings, whatever kind of approach to things. And to some degree that is, it's very valid. I've also come to realize just how, in a very humbling way, just how much just like the place that I'm living, whether I have access to the outdoors, things like that, just how much that affects kind of how I feel day to day, and just like my baseline emotional state, my baseline worldview. I Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the kind of a good example for this. When I was living in, so I was living in San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
and I love a lot of San Francisco. I love the people in San Francisco, and I had this experience of contrast a few years ago where I was living in sort of a intentional community where home. I loved everybody there, and it was also in the middle of SOMA, and it was like there's a bunch of people living there, and a few months later, I found myself in Berkeley, um, with not many, with not living. I lived with a partner for a while, and then I was kind of living on my own for a little bit with some space to walk. And the time alone made me realize just that even though I loved the people who I was living with, being around that many people and being kind of, especially in the middle of summer, where like if I wanted to go outside and go for a walk, like good luck. It's needles
Yeah,
and shit, and it's
yeah.
just human suffering everywhere.
I
Um,
find that among people I know, the way that they would approach this question is like very much a function of whether they've tried to live in Soma before.
mhm.
It's it's just a visceral lesson delivery device for this topic.
Yeah, like one of the things I just realizing is like I need space, period.
Uh-huh.
I took a little road trip in my truck a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to see the Milky Way, so I just slept outside of this national park on like a weekday, and there was literally nobody there. Like there was the closest human, there was like one other person with a tent like 200 yards away, and like nobody else. And there was just this sense of peace and relaxation that I had in that setting that I just, even now, like in the middle of Denver, um, in kind of, right now I have my own space. Like for me, and maybe this is a Finnish thing, maybe this is just how I'm wired, is, all of the above, but like space is just essential to my sanity. If I don't have
Mm.
space, it doesn't matter how much I love my environment, how much I love the people environment, how much I love, like, I need space. Otherwise, I go batshit crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I kind of like internalize it. And I remember it was, I was, uh, I learned a lot of kind of my own wiring as for like, okay, what actually brings me a sense of relaxation and calm and peace, like in a lot of those environments. But the most effective thing for me is like just get my surroundings in a way that I have like a lot of space and immediate access to nature, and that's like 70% of my sanity right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I have a similar thing that I don't think the word for it is space, but some ability to go out and go for a walk where the environment I'm walking in is calming and pleasant, and it maybe doesn't have to have trees because other ecosystems are fine, but definitely can't just be city.
Mhm.
um, is important to me.
Yeah.
um, another way that I read this question was um, how much I mean, it said physical environment, but I juxtaposed how much the emotional environment affects things,
Mhm.
like what people I'm around. I'm extremely empathetic, and I pick up on people's stuff, and it's not even
Yeah.
something I'm trying to do. I just my my body, my brain just does it anyway. It just delivers the emotional content of my surroundings, and if those emotional contents are not pleasant ones, then that stuff I am gonna have to process on my own.
Mhm.
So however, you know, I'm setting myself up for success or failure based on um, the level of emotional difficulty, say in my home environment. Is
Yeah.
when I talk about my having learned that boundaries are important things to me. Like boundaries are especially important for where I'm choosing to live and who I'm choosing to be around all the time.
Yeah. I would argue that this is very true for work as well. Um,
Mm.
and I think the question, how do physical surroundings affect your life, or I'm going to just say how do, or actually I'm going to translate this and make a little bit of a jump. How does the container that you're in, the containers, maybe plural, that you're in, affect your life?
Mm-hmm.
And home can be one of them. I think work is also a major one, and I think of workplaces as containers in which the leadership, like the team leaders and especially the CEOs, are kind of like, whether they're doing so consciously or not, they are creating the container and creating the surroundings and physical environment and emotional environment that the people in their company are experiencing.
Totally. Yes,
Yeah.
totally.
And I like to think of it as like the CEO is basically a somatic tuning fork for the rest of the company, but especially the people around him, and it sort of has a ripple effect. But
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in companies where the CEO is just like, they're sort of just self-destructively trying to uh, you know make as much money as possible, or kind of get the company to a certain level. And when you're doing that, like, no matter how much you're telling your employees, like, we value self-care, blah, 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 like, you are setting the example of the opposite, and that is what people follow.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, if you try to be like relaxed uh, and sort of like easygoing in an environment where the leadership is like hyper stressed, like it feels like you're going against the grain, and you're probably going to piss people off. Um, and to contrast that, I did some consulting at a company where uh, one of the values was happiness over growth. The CEO, like, I had asked him about it, and he basically said he didn't want to create a company that he didn't want to work at. And they actually, like, it was the first company I've ever seen that actually like lived to that and followed that. And it was a wonderful place to be. Like
Mm-hmm.
the just the work environment, the fact that they were having fun while they were working also meant they could be very authentic in their, when they're putting out videos or connecting with their customers. And
Yeah.
it gave me a lot of hope to kind of to see a company actually operating like that
Mm-hmm.
and winning.
Mm-hmm. It sounds lovely.
Mm-hmm.
You've got me thinking back to the one startup that I worked at, and I I would not say that the the models of CEO behavior you discussed are what was happening at the startup I worked at. They were they were whatever they were. But I do realize I haven't ever had a chance to like kind of debrief or decompress what all happened, and I haven't really like talked to them. Like I'm still in some sense connected to them socially, I guess.
Hmm.
And I would, if I would love to run into them. Like I like them personally. Um, but I don't think I've ever had a chance to be like, all of that stuff that happened during that time. Like, you know, what do we make of that? And I would love to have an opportunity to have that reflection process with them. I imagine they would have interesting things to say.
Yeah, I think that I think that, and hopefully for the better, our um, country, our world is at a little bit of an inflection point as far as uh, what people expect from their workplaces, and what
Hmm.
and how workers and bosses and money and flows of resources, like how those relate. I personally have a lot of really strong opinions about that, and I think a lot of mine um, go against the grain of how business is done.
Hmm.
Is mostly done, and are much more aligned with, like, okay, how can we um, like, I've been on projects that are a joy to work on, and that are a joy to work on whether you're running it or whether you're working on it. And that to me is like, okay, how do we, like, what's the comparison there, like, um how do we make work like that, because it can be and it should be. And for most people it really isn't. And I think that's it's abhorrent. It's a
Mm-hmm.
it's a massive just waste of human life, human potential, human
I,
experience.
I'm gonna this is like a can of worms thing that I'm just gonna say, and then
Go for it.
I'm gonna refuse to discuss it at all. Really, is that one uncommented upon, or like one implicit belief that a lot of people have, at least in our culture, but I don't think it's unique to our culture,
Hmm.
is that um, people will not do work, or will not be motivated to do work unless unless there's some kind of a real coercion, that people work only from a position of like fear or scarcity, rather
Yeah.
than from a position of abundance or fulfillment. And I think I this gets back to what you're talking about in the last podcast about you studying human nature.
Hmm.
That these are elements of our assumptions about human nature, and there are going to be, people who in their behavior tend to really err more towards one side or the other, or at least in the conditions they've experienced so far. But it's just, I think people act as if maybe one of these is more universally true than the other, whereas there's a real spectrum of behavior.
Yeah. There's one project that I'm working on right now, and it's it's a kind of interesting dynamic because we both kind of have this rule that if one of us is working so hard that we're going to resent the other for having done so, we don't do it. Like
Mm.
this, things just go undone until one of us feels like doing it, and it's actually working out really well. Um, and I think that this idea that people need some form of scarcity to want to do anything is um, I think is what we're used to running on. And I think that the idea that, oh, people are going to, just sit on their butts for and not do anything if they're able to do so. I think in the short term that's true, largely because we have a culture, especially in the US, of just working people until they drop and considering them disposable. So yeah, people want to take a fucking rest. People need to take a fucking rest, and I think that's a
Hmm.
good thing. Um, and once they're kind of satiated with that, then I think it's human nature to want um to contribute, whether it's like to your family, community, friends, whatever, to make the world and make your immediate surroundings a better place. And there's only really a small subset of those contributions that works in, you know capitalism getting systematically paid for it. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of it that really just gets thrown by the wayside.
Yeah.
Just in communities that we've been in, I've seen, people doing community care, like caring for people, helping people out, especially anything, making art, making like just for the sheer fun of it. Like there's no
Hmm.
way there's going to be a business model attached to it, or it's just a piece of art that's just too offensive to go into the mainstream, or just too weird to be capitalistically successful. But that's my favorite shit. That's where I see
No,
people.
that's authentic self-expression.
Yeah, yeah, that's where I see people really just that's just what makes me just glow when I see it. Um, and so I think this idea that, you have to, maybe looping it back to the physical surroundings question, that you have to have a surroundings of like financial or economic scarcity to motivate people to do things they don't want to do, and that's the only way we can have a society. It really, to me, betrays a lack of faith um, in people, in life, really, in
Hmm.
life's
Hmm.
willingness um, to create good conditions for itself, or to move itself forward.
Yeah. I think it I would not be adding much substantial over that. So I think that's as far as I want to talk about that.
Cool. Yeah, I feel pretty complete on that as well.
Yeah.
Where do we want to go from here?
There's this one.
I think also just looking at time, I didn't make a mental note of when we hit record, but we're probably coming up pretty close to the hour mark.
Okay. Did you want to squeeze in this one, or would you save that one for another potential podcast?
I think let's save that one for another potential podcast.
So we're kind of down to these couple over here.
Yep.
or actually, these aren't so bad.
Yeah. What's the grossest thing you ever ate?
So I tend to like most things. There are few enough things that I like really, really disliked and I found to be like super unpleasant experiences that I tend to remember them. And definitely the first time I tried durian. I've been told that there is good durian and bad durian, or like better durian and worse durian, and I probably didn't have a representative experience of the good stuff. But holy cow, I just didn't expect it to be such an awful experience. It was basically like trying to swallow stove gas. It was that smell of stove gas all throughout my mouth. And I managed to like swallow like one swallow's worth, and then I gargled and gargled and gargled, and then eventually it finally left my mouth, but for another couple hours I kept on burping stove gas and wanting to puke again. So I've had like a couple of things that have a little bit of durian in them, and it's a little bit. I would like to maybe at least once try like actual good fresh durian in Southeast Asia or something. Mm-hmm. But for now, that's definitely the worst I can remember.
Cool. I'm trying to think on my end. I remember I was not much of a participant in it, but I remember some kid in my 6th grade class ate a paper airplane.
I think I ate paper once when I was a little bit.
Yeah. I think I might have. I don't remember. I remember having this feels like a little bit of a cop out. I had a grasshopper at a Thai restaurant once, and it was actually really fucking good.
Yeah, I've done the bugs things. Yeah, mealworms.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right. Way of the House Husband on Netflix. So I just purely to prepare myself for this question, I actually watched one episode of this, and I believe you didn't. So I will task you with answering this question.
Yep, it's on you.
I thought it was interesting. It was kind of entertaining. For those who don't know, Way of the House Husband is this anime about this fearsome Yakuza gangster killer dude who's now kind of left that behind and has become a house husband, and there's a lot of like shots of him like chopping up like it brandishing a knife, and it looks all kind of Kill Bill and shit, and then he's just like chopping an onion or something. So I think to get all very woo-woo analytical on it, I think it's a reflection on modern masculinity and the overemphasis of violence on masculinity and the underemphasis of cooking and just like peaceful.
Or is it saying that you get to have them together?
And yeah, funny. I watched one episode. I don't know if I'm going to watch anymore, but thanks for the
Cool. Well, should we put a cap on it there? Does that sound good?
Yeah. You didn't watch it, so what are your opinions on it?
Right. I was thinking from what you said that it sounded like a movie I once saw called Gross Point Blank, where this guy, just the person who was once a killer and is now in this domestic setting, this guy who had gone off to become a hitman goes back to his high school reunion, and awkwardness ensues. It's good. It's got both John and Joan Cusack. So great. Any closing thoughts that you have for this edition, Maki?
I want to really briefly touch best low effort houseplants.
Okay.
Golden pothos are like, they grow like fucking crazy. And I have managed to have some for quite a while without killing them. So I recommend golden pothos. I don't know shit all much else about houseplants. Also, like little bamboo stems are kind of cool.
I'm currently keeping alive for the moment a little succulent, but they die slowly. So I don't know. I might be past it. I can't tell. As much as I like to think of the gardening metaphor, my on the ground experience has been really quite mixed, and I would love to become better at the lore of keeping these other kinds of creatures alive.
Yeah, we wish you well, question asker, in your quest for low effort.
I've adopted a personal rule though on this topic is to not tell myself I'm bad at plants. And basically not to tell myself I'm bad at things in general, like
yeah,
but just to say what I say is I'm a good gardener, but I just don't know it yet.
yeah, I agree with that. Don't take on identities of that don't take on identities that create shitty feedback loops.
Word that.
Yeah. And just be like, yeah, I don't know, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with this, and it kind of leaves it open to learning. I'm bad at this, especially when you haven't like figured out how to, actually do it. Is kind of it's kind of a silly conclusion.
One element of that I think of much more directly now is so another aspect of this that comes up a lot in my work is that if all you focus on is being bad at something, you're devaluing the failure. That the way to success is through failure. The way to learning is through learning lessons. And if one only ever sees the judgment in not being good at something, yet one is not allowing the possibility that those were part of becoming really good at something, that they were in it like a really valuable part of the process.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cool.
Yeah. Well, so that is time for us. We'll wrap things up there. I am Jay, and my partner, my friend here is Maki, and hopefully this was fun for not just us, and we might be doing this again, and if so, we will get a questionnaire out and see if there are other topics that people want to hear us talk about.
Yeah, thanks you all
for
for
your
listening.
time and attention. Yeah. All right. Bye.